Now, in this lesson, we want to learn how to solve equations of the form x plus a equals c and x minus a equals c. So our first problem here is x plus 8 equals 22. And we want to solve for x. So we want to get x by itself. This x needs to be by itself. And we see what is preventing x from being by itself is 8. So because that is a adding 8, the only way I can get rid of that 8 is to subtract that 8 away. And so that's what I'm going to do. And with equations, whatever I do to one side, I have to do the same thing to the other side of the equation. So I have my x, and then when I add 8 and subtract 8, I get 0. And now 22 minus 8, we get 14. And we just solve for x. Okay, so let's try this again. We have x plus 5 is equal to 29. I need to get rid of this number here. And the only way I can get rid of that number is if I subtract it away. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides of the equation. And when I do that, I get x, that's 0, and we get 24 here. Okay. Oh, I forgot to put my equal sign in between there. Okay. So now let's look at our third problem here. We have negative 19 is equal to x plus 1. Now keep in mind, when we're solving these problems, I need to have x by itself. And so what's preventing me from having that x by itself is that number there. So in order to get rid of that number, I need to subtract it away. And whatever I do to one side of the equation, I have to do the same thing on the other side of the equation. So negative 19 minus 1 is a negative 20. And then we have x. And so I've solved for x there. Next problem. We have a negative 13 is equal to x plus 1. Okay. I need to get rid of this 1 here. And the only way I can get rid of that 1 is to subtract it away. So I'm going to subtract 1 from one side of the equation. I'm going to subtract 1 from the other side of the equation. So I get a negative 14 is equal to x. We have 46 is equal to a plus 14. Okay. I need to get rid of 14 here. The only way I can get rid of that 14 is to subtract that 14 away. And if I subtract on one side of the equation, I have to subtract on the other side. And so I get 32 is equal to a. And our last problem, negative 5 is equal to x plus 7. I need to get rid of the 7 here. So in order to get rid of that 7, I'm going to subtract it away. And I have x, and a negative 5 minus 7 is a negative 12. And so I've solved for x. Okay, so now let's look at this problem. So you see that there's a slight difference now. Now we're looking at the, now we're looking at x minus a equals c. So now let's look. We need to get rid of the 10 here. Now in order to get rid of that 10, we need to do the opposite. So since this is a taken away of 10, we're going to add 10. So if we add 10 to both sides of the equation, we bring down the x, and when we subtract 10 and add 10, that gives us 0. And now 5 plus 10 gives us 15. We need to get x by itself, so we need to get rid of this number. And so in order to get rid of that number, we're going to add 16. This gives me x. And when I add 16 to 8, I get 24. So x equals 24. I need to get rid of the minus 43. So the only way I can get rid of it is to add 43. So we're going to add 43 to both sides of the equation. And I get x is equal to a negative 74 plus 43 gives us a negative 31. Okay. So now let's look at this one. This says 5 is equal to x minus 7. Let me get rid of that. Okay. Now I need to get rid of this 7 here. So the only way I can get rid of that 7 is that I add 7 to both sides of the equation. And so we have 5 plus 7, which gives us 12 here. And we have x left on the right-hand side of the equation. Okay. We get rid of that. Now, let's look at our next one. We have y minus 81 is equal to a negative 12. I need to get rid of this 81. So what am I going to do on both sides? I'm going to add 81 to both sides of the equation. And y, and then a negative 12 plus 81 is 69. So y is equal to 69. And our last problem is 1 is equal to x minus 13. Okay. I need to get rid of the 13 here. And now the only way I can get rid of that 13 is to add 13 to both sides of the equation. And 1 plus 13 gives me 14. I have x, and minus 13 and plus 13 gives us 0. So we're saying 14 is equal to x. Now, what I would like for you to do is to pause the video and you try these three problems on your own. So the first problem, you should have gotten x equals 9. The second one, x equals 1. And then for the last one, x equals 1.